Hi, and welcome to Gatos Forge. I'm Josh, and today we are going to be working on part 2 of the Stag antler handled Bowie knife work in progress video series. Today we're going to be doing the rough grinding, and hopefully we'll have enough time to get to the heat treatment, and maybe we'll even start on the finish grinding. I'm not sure. We'll see how time goes. But for the grinding process, we're going to be working with this and this machine. This is our 2x72. This is really the workhorse of all knife grinding operations. Most of your grinding operations get done on this. I also use the 9-inch variable speed reversing disc grinder for a lot of my straightening work, and especially in the finish grinding we'll be using that a lot. I wanted to get a hold of the knife here and show it to you. I'm going to put that up here and see where we got after the last round. Okay, this is the knife as forged. It's a little over 9 inches long. We can see that I've cleaned it up a little bit here. What I do to clean up after my forging is I soak it in a weak solution of pH Down. pH Down is a product that you can get at pool care stores, in the pool section of your local home improvement store. It's a dry acid. I mix up a light solution, probably about a half a cup to 2 gallons of water, and that will help remove all of the scale. You know, the scale can then easily be removed with a wire brush. You can see we still have some heavy scaling here that's adhered to the steel, and a little bit in the same section over here, but we're going to be taking that off in the rough grind. Okay, so I have the 2x72 set up. I've chipped my platen way back, my flat platen way back. I've got a 60 grit ceramic belt on here. And I'm taking my knife, and I've determined by placing this on a very flat surface, like a piece of granite, which is the flatter of my two sides. The first thing we want to do with this knife is we want to get 2 flat parallel sides on the knife. So I'm going to start by grinding this side down until I get enough surface area on this knife that's all level and straight that I can put this whole knife on my surface grinder, and I can put another flat surface on this side to match this one, and then my knife will be a uniform thickness and we'll have 2 flat parallel sides. So I've got my magnet, and I'm going to attach my knife to the magnet, and I'm going to start grinding on this point up on the grinder. Some guys grind point down, some guys grind point up. I prefer to grind point up. I think the grinder has a tendency to cut a little bit sharper on the leading edge of the metal. So if I'm going to get a distal taper in any direction, I want it to happen at the point. I want the point to be a little thinner than the backside. My sides won't be exactly parallel, but they will be flat, and they'll be darn close to parallel. So here we go. I'm going to operate the grinder at about 70% of speed. I'm going to lay it flat on there. Applying a slight pressure, and you can see I'm starting to generate flat spots. And what I'm really looking for is I'm looking for a flat surface that goes all the way through the ricasso. So if I can get a nice flat surface in an L shape here, then I know I can set this on my surface grinder and not have it wobble back and forth. Now with ceramic belts, in order to get them to cut as west as they can, you have to apply some pressure to crush the grains of ceramic in the belt and always get fresh cutting surfaces. Don't forget to quench every once in a while. You don't want the blade to get overheated again. And being that you're on a magnet, it's very difficult to tell where exactly that too hot point is. But I look like I've got enough flat area here where I can work on the surface grinder and I can get myself going and I can make another spot on the other side. So we're going to set up the surface grinder here. I love my KMG and I love my surface grinding attachment that was made for me for this machine. And you're going to see how that works. Okay, so here we have the surface grinding contraption set up on my 2x72 KMG grinder. We've got a magnetic chuck right here on a slide bar. We've got the contact wheel here with the 60-degree belt. And this is our depth adjustment that pushes the magnetic chuck closer to the contact wheel or further away when it slides. So I'm going to take the side I surface ground on my platen and I'm going to set it down on my magnetic chuck. And I'm going to test for my center and depth on my belt. And I'm going to adjust my depth until I just start to hit the contact wheel. And I'm going to start cutting. And I'm going to do this operation at a fairly high speed on the surface grinder. So I'm going to turn my speed all the way up. And I'm going to start it up. Forgot to put my spark guard in. That keeps sparks from going underneath the workbench. It's kind of important. Now what I'm going for here is very similar to what I went for on the other side with a flat platen. Is I'm going for a smooth line down the spine and across my ricasso area, across my blade in some fashion, so that I get that L shape, so it's no longer a wobbly sort of a thing. Now I've got it pretty well good across the ricasso. There's a couple of little spots there and I'm onto the tang area. So I'm going to just do a couple more passes, then I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to grind the other side out and I'm going to make sure I have two sides that are parallel to one another. And that's that. Once we have those two sides looking basically like that, we're ready to go and profile the blade, which is our next step. Okay, so here's our knife as we surface ground it. And as you may remember from part one of this video, when I was forging the blade out, I was using a template. And that template is basically made pretty much exactly what I want this knife to be in terms of size and shape. It's not an absolute, scripture here. This is not perfectly how I'm going to make it. It may be a little bit longer, maybe a little narrower, whatever. But this is the basic idea I want to work to. So I've got my knife and I'm going to do a little layout work here. I've got some spray layout dye and I'm just going to kind of give it a light coating of blue on there and let it dry. It dries pretty quickly. And I'm going to lay my template down over it and I'm going to line up my plunge cut area, my chole area, because that's really the most important part I want to be able to get a hold of here. I'm going to line that up. And I'm going to get my blade pretty much where I want it to be. I'm a little long out in the nose. I think I'm going to take advantage of that. I'm going to slide on out at a later point, but right here, I'm going to cut a line with a shiny pointy scribe, and I'm just going to kind of like scribe around my outside edge. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide this a little bit forward so I can take advantage of that. And I've got a nice bright line here that I can follow. I'm going to keep my edge on there. And I'm going to take that out and I'm going to manipulate that. And I'm going to put in my clip. Whoop. Line that up. Grab my clip in. And now I should have a bright shiny line where I want to grind my profile to. Okay, so we've got our blue layout die, we've got our scribed line where we want to grind to, we've got our 60-degree belt back on our 2x72, we've got our platen squared up to our work rest. Now what I didn't show you was on the surface grinder, I only showed you where I took the sides to 60 grit. I then went back over them and took them all down to 120 grit just to get them a slightly smoother surface. And it's going to help when we go around here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grind into my line along my spine area, and I'm going to get that fairly straight. I'll flip it over. And I'm going to do the edge area. At 60 grit it goes pretty fast, even with this fairly burnt used belt here. Come in and clean up my chole a little. And then it's going to come time to put in the clip. Into the clip. Put in that clip, I'm going to use a different platen. So I'm going to have to stop and I'm going to put it in different platen. This platen, I made this myself. I just bought a regular piece of flat platen steel made and tapped and drilled already for the KMG. And I cut a piece of water heater out of it. And that water heater was about 14 inches in diameter. So I got a piece of curved pipe that's been welded to the front of this platen, which gives me like a 7-inch radius. which allows for cutting curves a little easier. And it just screws right into here, just, normally like any other platen. And once we get it in place, I can do those inside curves fairly easily. And so you can see as I slide across there, I'm using that curvature in the platen to push that line further down to my scribed line on here. Now I'm not going to go all the way down to it. I'm going to kind of get something that I think looks really nice, looks appropriate for the length, but it's going to end up being pretty close to that line. But I'm not going to go all the way to that line because I'm going to leave some meat there to take off in my finished grind. So that's that. We've got a little spot back here where the clip doesn't meet the back of the spine. The spine is not perfectly straight, so we're going to straighten that out next. And I think straightening that out, I'm going to take this clip back a little bit further here, and then once I straighten out this back, I'll show you how I do that. That whole little spot will go away. Okay, so for this next operation, I've got a work rest on this grinder that I made for this, and it's for a variety of different purposes, but one of the purposes is to produce long, straight, square edges on my knives. So I've set it up so it is perpendicular to the platen this way, and I can bring the knife in like this, and I can press it up against there, and I can get that whole back of the knife perfectly straight and square to the plane of the knife. Let's see if we can get a little more light on the subject here, and we'll go for it. And you can see the scratches that go across the knife like this. When you get all of those out, you've managed to straighten this whole blessed area out. And there we go. Just a little bit left right there and that little bit in the corner, and we're okay. And we're going to take that last little bit out at a slightly finer grit. There we go. Okay, so before I can start grinding the bevels on here, I'm going to need to establish my center line. And how I do that is I take my friendly black Sharpie pen and I make the edge of my knife nice and black. And when I get that whole edge nice and black, I'm going to take a pair of digital calipers and we'll go to I set it for decimals, and I'm going to measure the thickness of my ricasso, which is 0.2265. And I'm going to say, okay, half of 2265 is, let's call it 1135. That would be 2270. We'll call it 1135. I'm going to then rock my calipers down till they read 1135 or 1130 or somewhere pretty close to that. What's a few thousandths off of center between friends? A couple of thousandths of an inch here and there isn't going to matter a whole heck of a lot. But here we go. We are at 1130. 1130 sounds pretty good. Now this center line jig I've made, you can buy these, you can make them yourself. I made this one out of a piece of angle iron, a couple of solid pieces of half-inch pipe, and a couple of saw blades, fresh saw blades I cut off of, they got a carbide tip on them, I cut off of a circular saw. But I'm going to set this, I've got my caliper set at 1130. I'm going to set my depth on my center scribes. I'm going to set this one right there on that. So that's 1130. I'm going to take the other side out of play. I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to lay it on those flat edges, and I'm going to cut a scribe line on there. And you'll see there's a bright shiny line there in the black where the center of that edge should be. Flip the knife over, cut a little bit on the other side, see if it makes a difference. If it doesn't, great. If it does, well then I have two lines and my center is somewhere in between them. It's in between those little spots. There we go. So now I know where my center edge is.